baby, we got to the juicy parts of this book, in my opinion. No pressure, but who got to that last page? Woo! Who got to that last word? How do we feel about the way the book ends and sort of what we see, who Black Tom becomes, right? I saw Anna, I saw Barbara, I saw Tara. If either of y'all want to kick us off, or anyone for that matter, but how do we feel?
I didn't catch the beginning last week, but did you talk about that HBO series, Lovecraft Country?
Lovecraft. Oh yes, we did. But
yeah,
please talk about it more.
No, because my daughter's last week, she was like, "Is that thing?" So I went, of course, on YouTube and I spent a few minutes on that, and then I got the book, the Audible. And I just, in 2 days, listened to it over and over. Because somebody said that a voice would change, but I didn't hear no voice changing. What I did was I changed the speed of the voice on the thing. But
that doesn't count.
It's an interesting novel. It's interesting. I liked it.
You don't think that Tom Tester
I liked
changes?
it. I'm glad you liked it. I liked it.
Huh?
You don't think that Tom Tester changes?
Yeah, he changes.
I think that's the person who changes.
But yeah, but the voice, the voice is basically the same.
Yeah.
In the Audible, in
in the Audible, I understand now.
I thought it was.
You mean the voice of the character or the?
Yeah, somebody said, I thought they were gonna turn into like a monster voice or something, huh?
But it was though, because he sounded just like oh boy, he was like, when he was talking to the police officer Malone or whatever, and he answered the door, he was like, "We've been expecting you," and all this other stuff. He sounded just like the other guy.
Yeah, that's definitely when the voice changes. I know what you mean, Anna. I was expecting a whole different actor, like a whole different person. But I realized, yes, the voice did change. It wasn't the same voice as the voice that was in the beginning. As he changed into the Sleeping King, he embodied. So whoever I don't remember the name of the actor on the Audible, but he has the gift of being able to shift his voices around for the different characters, and so I do believe that he shifted his voice when he became what he was supposed to become at that moment to let the listeners know that there is this shift in character here.
Un poquito.
But I can understand why it would be missed. It was the same person changing his voice.
Switching from women to man to father to, so his voice was really taking on the characters, but yeah. I liked it.
Yeah. Let me ask y'all something. Who did Tommy become? Since y'all said that what he became and what happened of him. Who did he become, y'all? What happened?
You said the Sleeping King. I don't know about that, but he became powerful.
Is that who he becomes?
He sounded to me like he was kind of possessed. Although it was subtle, you did notice the voice change. But he did seem kind of possessed, like not Tommy. In fact, they weren't calling him Tommy anymore. They were calling him Black Tom. So I guess that's who he becomes.
Yes.
So I believe that. I'm sorry, what was that?
No, you believe that.
I believe that he had consumed Robert Sudan's power. And I don't know, some kind of crazy magical, I don't even know if it's magical or possessed or some kind of witchcraft. I don't really exactly know what word I'm trying to grasp here to explain what it is, but I don't know. When I thought about it, it was just kind of like some kind of possession.
Zigzag zig.
Right.
Yeah, but
I was thinking
That's
about
exactly what I felt, yeah.
I was thinking about him from the beginning of the book, because from the very beginning when he's delivering that book, he knows that he cannot give that woman the last page. And I had been asking myself, so how does he know that? So to me, from the get-go, he's already he's already something else. Because your average Black man's not going to know to do that, or our average person, period. So in the life of this book, I said from the get-go, he's already a character in who knows something. And the other thing I started thinking about was like the Greek tragedies, and how, a character will go to the underworld to get certain a certain kind of awareness, or learn something, or achieve some kind of power. And maybe Robert Sondheim's apartment is like the underworld, or they go from the apartment to the projects, no less. And the projects become the entry, which is kind of funny as all get out, becomes the entryway to the underworld. That's why I started thinking about it in like Greek drama type stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's spot on. I think that's brilliant.
Or the
And
secret
I think everyone's onto something when they name that the secret society, right? The secret alphabet, all these things sort of lead to something that Barbara had stated earlier, and Anna, was that we're not sure what has happened, but we know Tommy is not the same, and it's something otherworldly or supernatural that has shifted him. And in fact, if we go to the last page, or the second to last page, right? He's with Buckeye. They're back at that restaurant at the Victorian Society, and we see him in some sort of semblance of normal, right? But we know that he's feeling heavy, and he shows Buckeye the knife, right? The bloody knife, and how he killed the guy.
Killing people, man.
He's killing people, right? Outwardly. But having that moment still with Buckeye is like he's still himself until he tells him. What does Buckeye tell him? He starts talking about his daddy, and he tells Buckeye, but at least my daddy never lost his soul. And he said, I wonder if I'll ever get mine back. So automatic right there, and then he jumps, right? Or he disappears, or we're not quite sure.
He jumps out of a window.
But we know in that moment that it's not necessarily Tommy. Yes, he jumps out of a window. So I think y'all are spot on with that. How do we feel about that ending? I have a lot of feelings. I don't like it.
I mean, he says on page 130, when he's having the conversation with Malone towards the end, right? And Malone says to him, "You're a monster then," right? And Black Tommy, I mean, he says, "I was made one," right? Yeah. So I wasn't just thinking about it in terms of what he becomes, but what he was made into, right? And I think about, just the plight of the Black man, right? And what he's had to overcome, oversee, what he's seen that turns him into this, right? Like the killing, watching his father struggle, or his mom die, the killing of his father in plain sight, right? That he had to contend with, just the struggles that he had to endure, that he had to see, to the point where, with Malone, I don't think it's an accident that he cut off his eyelids, right? Like, you can't choose to turn a blind eye to everything that you've been a part of creating, including me, right? Including how you have created me. So I'm gonna cut your eyelids out, right? So
he let him go too.
That you can't see what you and your people have done, right? So I mean, I'm not mad. Like, it's not so much.
I'm not mad, but you're naming.
It's not what he became. It's what he was made.
Yeah, I'm not mad either.
Or what he was all along.
No.
Right, and the tools he had within that. But I guess what I'm mad about is that like he just jumped out of a thing and now we don't know what happens? Are you kidding me? Especially after that amazing analysis, Lydia, that you just gave, this understanding of hold on, it says my connection is unstable.
Yeah.
Let me give it a second.
He goes to
Y'all can hear me?
Lovecraft country then.
You know what? It reminds me of Song of Solomon at the end.
Yes,
When you don't know
yes.
if you don't know if they've killed each other or whatever. And it also reminds me of The People Who Could Fly by Virginia Hamilton, how they talked about slaves being able to fly away. Like, yeah, it trying to trip me out. I didn't get the zeb, whatever that part, like what is that supposed to mean? But yeah, and even like thinking about Buckeye and how good of a friend he was. Like
He was a day one.
I'm
loved
telling
him.
you,
I
he
loved
didn't even ask
him.
any questions.
Yes.
You know, I'm like, look, I'm your ride or die, but
That's
do
a
we have
best
to die?
friend.
Right. Do we
That's-
have to? Yeah, he was awesome.
That was the best friend. The knife was on the table. He didn't skip a beat. He was like,
Yeah.
oh, let me put this napkin. Let me take this knife. Let me hide it.
Right.
Like he didn't skip a beat.
Very
Buckeye
Harlem, very
called
Harlem.
to bury a body. That's Buckeye right there. That's
All right. That's a
who
friend.
you call. We all need friends like Buckeye. We all do. We all do. I have one. We all need one. You can
Don't
call
get
and just
my
say,
dick.
hey, girl, just meet me here. Just meet me here. Don't ask me any questions.
Uh-huh.
Just show up.
Don't get any ideas, Lydia. All right.
We all need one. We all need one.
Lydia, I want to name something that you brought up because I just have a question that's a little bit unrelated to this plot altogether, but it's in my mind as Lydia said it, and now my mind is like, ooh, I wonder how they feel about this. Because thank you for that analysis. It was brilliant. Naming that like what's happening with Tommy Tester is an exact mirror of what we see happening on a, societal level or on a national level in the image and in the ideology of the Black man, right? And naming that like in the Black man's perspective or in the Black man's shoes or in the Black man's struggle, then this is absolutely something in which how can we blame one for what they've been put into, right? And like, I love those connections because I agree and I feel like Victor LaValle, y'all know I want to call him LaValle like the rest of us. Victor LaValle. I agree that that's where he was trying to go with that. And I have a question now about that because
It's true.
I just wonder that this is 1921 and I wonder in 2021, right? When we talk about the dismantling of patriarchy and the dismantling of gender and understanding the Black man's, I say the Black man loosely because, these are ways in which we identify ourselves, but it's bigger than that, right? The Black man's shoes, how do we then dismantle those notions of like, well, this is what I've been made into a Black man? Because then we see in patriarchy itself, particularly with Black men, this idea that like we get to do or act or be in a certain way because of what we've been pushed, oppressed, and made to. And then naming that is the Black plight, the Black person, the Black body's plight. Like it's not only Black men that go through that, right? And often that's the one we see. So I don't really know if y'all understand what I'm trying to ask because I don't know if I even asked it. But what I'm asking is, in sort of that same notion of Tommy becoming this thing in which he was pushed into, do you think maybe Tommy had a choice to not be in that? I'm just, I'm being facilitated. I'm just challenging.
Everybody.
You
think
always
maybe he
have
had
a choice.
We always.
You al-
everybody
you
has-
always have a
Do
choice.
Do we have a choice? You know what I mean? Like,
You
talk
always
to me,
have a
Steve.
choice. You know. I think you always have a choice.
You have a choice.
And I think he exercised. I didn't get to the end, but the way you describe it, it sounds like he exercises a choice in jumping out the window. And we don't know that it leads to his death. It may lead to his
You don't know if he was pushed.
or it just may lead to his escape.
He could have been pushed by the power.
But I think you always have a choice.
My analysis has to do with
Thank you, Dr.
his need for vengeance, his need, and I said this last week, and I think the story bears this out. He made a deal and it cost him his soul. He was serving. He was making believe that he was the servant Yes, master. He was doing everything that the magician wanted him to do, and he was playing a role. But it was all a facade. He was just counting. Who were the three people that suffered? It was Soydam, it was Malone, and it was Howard. And now after he took his revenge, now he had to pay. And he had to join. So he didn't die. When he leapt out, he was actually going into that other dimension, that big black hole. The black hole where he sent Ma at and the house and all her property to. He was now going to serve his new master. And he knew that he was starting the mass destruction of the world. And he was part of that process, but he did it willingly for the purpose of revenge for the death of his dad.
Do you, when you just said that, oh my God, like I'm thinking about religion. I'm thinking about the Sleeping King and who that might refer to, and you know, like the price you pay for maybe being involved in religion. You know, we think that we are doing the right thing, or that there is some kind of reward or something. I don't know why, but for some reason that came to me about, you know, I'm thinking, of course, specifically about like Christianity and how when, you know, with religion or specifically Christianity, you know, you are serving your master who is going to come back one day. And, you know, we think about the Crusades, where people were killed in the honor of God and all of these other things. But I wonder, you know.
It's magic, but we don't know
He
what
felt
kind
bad
of.
about losing his soul. He said he wished he had been more like his father, because his father didn't have much, but he never lost his soul. So I think that really bothered him. He said, I wonder if I could ever get mine back.
Nah,
And then he went and jumped out the window.
nah, you can't
Right.
get it back.
So do we think even though to someone named he's going off to create the destruction of this current world in order to make new for a new world? Let me ask y'all, do you think he has an opportunity to get his soul back? Do you think that happens? You think once you cross that line, you can come back?
We all hope
I
for
agree.
that. We all hope for redemption. Goes
I
back
agree,
to,
Evelyn. We do
yeah,
all hope for
we all
that.
hope for redemption. The sinner, that's what you were saying,
Who think-
Natasha, about religion. You know, no matter how much of a sinner you are, you always hope for forgiveness.
Depends what book you're reading.
True, because it could be, what is it called, purgatory? You might be able to redeem yourself.
Yeah.
But to your question. Go ahead, Tara.
I'm sorry. What do the last three words mean? Zig, zag, zig. What does that
Zigzag,
mean?
zig. I love
Letter
Zig Zag Zig was a reference. I believe earlier.
that was the page, the
that
last
was the
page, right?
letter of the supreme alphabet.
Of the Supreme
Yeah.
Alphabet.
That's the last, yeah.
Tommy, so on page 14 on the bottom, I'll read it to you. It goes, Tommy undid the latch of the guitar case and held it open. Ma-at leaned forward so her head peeked out into the daylight. Inside lay the book, no larger than the palm of Tommy's hand. Its front and back covers were sallow yellow. 3 words had been etched on both sides. Zig, zag, zig.
What
Tommy
page is
didn't know
that,
what
Paula?
the word meant. Page 14. Tommy didn't know what the words meant, nor did he care to know. He hadn't read this book, never even touched it with his bare hands. He'd been hired to transport the little yellow book, and that's all he had done. He'd been the right man for this task, in part because he knew that he shouldn't do any more than that. A good hustler isn't curious. A good hustler only wants his pay. So I'm going to name that while Tommy was putting himself, as Jacqueline referenced, in things earlier, I do think he really didn't know because he didn't want to know. And that version of Tommy, zigzag zig, to that last page of Tommy, zigzag zig, it's quite the transformation, right? It's quite the change. Tara,
So
thank
I
you for bringing us.
Googled it. You want to hear what it says?
Evelyn, what
Yeah.
is it?
Okay, in the divine alphabet, Z stands for zigzag zig, which means knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. It is the last letter of the alphabet and represents the final step of consciousness. It stands for ruler, knowledge, wisdom, understanding, Allah. I never knew that.
All right. So I never knew that either, but I do know that LaValle, my connection is unstable again. So give me a second. I'm going to work through this. And here we go.
There you go.
I do that. I think I'm back. I do know that LaValle mentions the supreme alphabet a lot in all of his works, right? And he says he's obsessed with it. Do y'all understand that? Like, I didn't get it.
I mean, I get the Google meaning of it, but in the context of the book, no. And
Right.
and maybe that's his point. He leaves a sign. I mean, these people are dealing in signs and symbols.
His body was never found.
Whose body?
Nope.
Tommy Tester's body was never found. That was the last few words. Tommy Tester's body was never found, and then zigzag zig.
All right, so then he does go to someplace
Else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He goes to the outer limits or the inner limits. I don't know. That's all I got.
Yeah. Basically, it expresses the final life, the final stages of your life. So it does kind of relate to him when he throws himself out the window, and it's his level of maturity. He's reached it. So he sold his soul, and now it's like the price he had to pay for all of that. So the zigzag zig is the final letter of the supreme alphabet. Therefore, it means it's the finality of his life. It's like he's reached a mature, understanding, or he's mastered his life. I don't know. I mean, like Evelyn said, yeah, maybe he did go to the other side. I don't believe he just killed himself and then that's it. And no, but I think it's going to the next level or the next stages of the outer worlds or whatever it is that it is. But the supreme alphabet is basically the nation of the gods. So it's completely, every letter it represents something. And that letter, which is the final letter, represents his final stage in this life.
And hearing that makes me think then, yes, okay, then yeah, he did make his choice. He was in his choice around how all of these things played out, right? These things happened to him, and he still made a choice in how to navigate that, which is just an interesting thing to note when we are in our present day bodies and when our own struggles, right? Like, even though we get pushed to something, how we still always have a choice,
I don't know. I wonder, yes. And I wonder if even if we have choices, that our choices are sometimes limited, right? Like we can't always enjoy the full scope of limitless choices. Like I feel like there are some that have the opportunities for more choices than others, and that there are those who their choices are limited and they can only operate within a small box of choices, whereas others have more choices to operate within. And I feel like, given his context,
all the time,
that he may feel like he didn't have choices, right? And I also wonder about, I know he states it comes from him, so it's his narrative, in terms of, he lost his soul. But I wonder, like, what causes him to say that he lost his soul? Like, what do we make of that? Did he lose his soul, or did he gain it? Like, is it because he killed those individuals that he lost his soul? Like, the officers who killed
Yeah, I
his
think
father lose their soul?
I
You
agree.
know, like what's the
I think
soul
you're
losing?
saying it. I think that's exactly what it is.
I think,
But I think you're
Lydia,
saying it. That's exactly, you know what it is. Saying, going through all of these things, I'm not who I was. And I want to name that choices are limitless every day. I mean, choices aren't limitless for everybody every day. That's absolutely true. There are people that have an abundance of choices, and there are people that have slimmer choices. But what it's important to note is that in Black body, the idea of not having a choice has been the overriding narrative for everything for so long. And to be able to be in a space where like that is not it, there's always a choice, even in our vengeance, even in our joy, even in our revolution, and even in the things that we retract and go into. It's complicated, but there are choices. Because there's a danger in assuming that because I have less choices, I don't have a choice. Period. Even if it serves us, there's always a danger in that. And I think literally Tommy's losing of the soul and naming, he's not who he was, right? And whether he's gained more because of it, he feels at a loss. And you know, I loved the holding of all of those multiple truths at the same time. There is no, I'm stronger because I killed someone, or I killed someone and now I'm a devil. It's none of those things. I think LaValle is showing us is we get pushed and we get pushed and we have choices in how we navigate those things in which we move. And it's complicated. It's complicated.
It is very complex. It is very complex.
We named last week that anger and vengeance and all those things are necessary. And we also named that it's still a danger in choosing them, right? We still, and we may embrace it, we may be ready for it, but you're still in a danger, and you still shift and you become something else. And is it worth it? How many of us have made choices right now in this space together? How many of us have had to make choices that allow us to sort of teeter-totter on both? Not all the way good, not all the way bad. You know, we all get pushed into that. I would argue, especially in the pandemic, who knows what choices people have had to make, right? In order to survive, in order to keep it pushing. It doesn't make one completely good or completely bad, but our choices affect us and they change us. And I think that's like a big, what is it? Theme? Well, I don't know. I can't think. I'm so tired, y'all. I think that's a theme that's trying to like come up toward the end of the book.
Or epiphany.
An epiphany for me, for sure, Jacqueline, for me.
Okay.
Ron, what you think about this Black man jumping out the window? What's up? Like, what are you thinking?
You say my name?
Yes, Ron Kavanaugh.
I'm sorry. I actually didn't get to the end of the book, so
Ooh, lots of spoilers. That's okay.
yes, that's all right.
That's okay.
Well, what do you think about this conversation around change in Black body as a Black man?
Yeah, you know, I think I think the book has been pretty interesting, and I'm not a big sci-fi person.
Me neither.
But this whole idea of change and how Tommy Tester suddenly goes from like a seeker to a holder of knowledge, where he goes from somebody who is, I don't know what his intents are in the beginning of the book, but they seem more intentional when you compare it to where he ends up in the book after this transformation, and after he sort of becomes the center of attention, and after his elevated status with Malone and with the other police officers. It's just interesting that even to place a Black man in that position in those times is pretty interesting. Because normally, I mean, of course, there's a black person writing the book, and I would assume he's writing as a response to the history of Lovecraft and the books and his reputation for being a racist. So I thought that was pretty interesting. The one thing, and this is a criticism of the writer and the book, I wasn't sure if this should
Ooh,
be.
that's what I was waiting for.
I wasn't sure if this should be a novel or a short story. It felt unfinished in many ways, and it also felt like it was skipping around too much for my taste anyway. Like how Tommy Tester is suddenly the man, and his voice has his perspective in the book has changed, sort of caught me off guard. And I felt like I needed more story going into that part of it. So yeah.
Also, did it ever say where he got the book from?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of unsolved mysteries here.
That's why it felt like it should have been much shorter and a part of a short story collection, or fleshed it out to a full novel. And 160 pages is no joke, but it felt like it needed more.
Yeah,
And
you rarely see the novella form
Yeah.
in contemporary literature at this point. It's really a real odd child,
Yeah.
So I'm even surprised he was able to get it published, to be quite frank. Except for he has this huge reputation, so
Right.
sometimes a publisher will take something that's undone.
Yeah. And I'm not saying it was undone. This might have been the author's intention,
Sure.
But I felt like it just needed more or less.
I felt that it had to do it. I had I didn't have the time, but I had the feeling that I would have liked to have read the original Lovecraft story. What is it? Red Hook. What is it called? The name of the original story?
The hanging of Red
The
Hook.
Hanging at Red Hook.
I believe it's called The Hanging at Red Hook.
And I felt that this book was a response to that, almost like a postscript, like an epilogue to that. And maybe that would have answered a couple, filled in some of those questions that we have about, what was happening in Red Hook, what was happening with Malone, how these three characters came together. And then Tommy, Black Tom coming in at, I don't think that Lovecraft would have included that character. Was he part of that character in the original Lovecraft story? Black Tom? Does anybody know?
Yeah, I don't know.
I can't picture it.
There is no.
I can't picture having a racist make this guy the anti-hero kind of thing. I can't see that. So I think that if it would have made
there
sense.
is no Black Tom. There is a character named Malone.
Yeah.
Why can't they hear me? There's a character named Malone.
Right.
Miss Malone, like it is in the book, same Tom. Remember, they have the same name. Tommy and Tom and Malone, they got the same name.
Yeah.
It's not a Black Tom in the Lovecraft one, but it's a dude named Tom.
So that's what I'm saying. I agree with you, Ron, that it did seem like it was, as a standalone, it wasn't enough. And that perhaps it would have made more sense if it was read after reading the original Hanging of Red Hook.
Yeah, which is, and I thought about that because I believe that book is like not the H.P. Lovecraft book is not even a book. I mean, how many pages in it? It's like really short, right? Is it a short story? So we could have read both together. That's something to keep in mind for the future. If we ever run into a situation like this, it might help to discuss both works, and do it like more comparative literature, not to get too collegiate.
this would probably be one of those times, you know, like watching the Lovecraft, the country, the series made me want to read the book. But in this case, I think I would never want to read the original Lovecraft. You know what I'm saying? I wouldn't want to read any of his stuff just because, you know, like, but what you were saying, Ron, I agree with that too, because like what's the name of the place where the father ate? And I guess maybe it needed to be there so that the father and the son could have the conversation about
The Victorian society.
Yeah, the Victorian society. But otherwise, like, what's his home? Lord, my memory is terrible. His homeboy didn't need to be mentioned at any point. Even him telling the lady, Buckeye, yes. Even him telling the lady where he got the book from and how dangerous it was, where they never even addressed where did the book come from, because he told her it came from the Victorian society, but really, like, it just didn't even need to be included in there at all, really, because it wasn't this dangerous place. You know, even when they walked in, they were expecting this, you know, shady, what you call place, and it was just all, you know, normal or whatever. But yeah, I'm stuck. I'm stuck on that part.
I appreciated Buckeye in the end. I don't know. Oh, sorry, they're hitting me up. I appreciated Buckeye in the end. Gosh.
Just want to mention though, as far as, because people are saying about, you know, Buckeye being ride or die friend and everything. I think the irony of it all though is that even though he used this razor, right, to kill everyone, but he didn't necessarily just need the razor. It was the supernatural power plus the razor. And then Buckeye takes it from him to conceal it. But it's like, it's almost besides the point, because it's like Black Tom has all this power. He's not the hustler Tom who needs his boy to hide a weapon for him, because otherwise the cops are going to get him. He has this immense power now. He's able to escape into thin air. So it's like, besides the point, he didn't really need Buckeye to cover for him, because now he's bathed in all this tremendous power. As shown in, not Park Slope, wherever they were in Brooklyn when he dispatched all the cops and everything. So I don't know, that's just something that jumped out at me.
And that also goes back to
I think Buckeye is being used more. Sorry, we're wrong.
That also goes back to what someone was saying earlier about having always having choices. If you have a ride or die, that person doesn't have a choice. They are with you, ride or die. And Buckeye is going to support Tom no matter what. So sometimes you don't have choices. Sometimes your friendship or your blood relation doesn't give you a choice to enter a situation that's dangerous. Like you must do it because that's your homegirl or your homeboy or something like that. So it's things like that, you know, sometimes you don't have choices.
I think Buckeye is being used not necessarily to help, even though maybe in his mind he thinks he can, because he sees his friend, pardon my French, but he sees his friend all messed up, all fucked up, right? Because it's like, dude, you're not eating, you're not looking, you got blood all over you, what's up? I think it's important for us to see before Tommy decides to make that last decision. It's important for us to see someone who knew him before all of this nonsense. And his daddy's not here no more, right? It was important to kind of see that essence. At this point, us as the reader, we know Tom to have all of this power, all of this otherworldly, supernatural, maybe as Lydia was mentioning before, maybe not all the way back, but definitely a lot of power, right? We see him changed. And it's important to have that one person who knew him before all of this, so that it's not just us as the reader who's like, is something different with Tommy? Like he's just different now. It's also his own community. It kind of represents and it shows Harlem itself. He comes back to Harlem and he can't really be there. You know what I mean? And that's his home. And he names, I had everything I needed here. I didn't need to go nowhere. And I messed that up. And I think Buckeye is sort of representation of that redemption, that even when we make those choices for the greater good, it's still takes a toll on us. There's still a price. It's still a shift. And I think Buckeye's conversation with Tom at that table sort of represents that redemption moment, right? Maybe he's not no longer all the way human, but he still has those feelings. Thank you for nodding your heads. I feel very smart.
I agree. I think at that point, doesn't he ask him? Can't remember. Doesn't he say he's talking and Buckeye's like, no, you are a good, like, yeah, you've always been good. You still are, you know, you've always been good. I don't know if that's an accident on LaValle's part, you know, because I'm sure at that point before, I'm not sure when Buckeye realizes something is up, right? I'm not sure when he realizes it. I'm going to imagine that he realizes it before he actually covers it with the napkin and, you know, puts it in. I think he probably knows something is off from the moment he walks in, right? From the moment that Black Tom walks in, and to use that time to affirm him, right? And say, you know, you have always been good, and you still are. I think that's interesting, and I'm only thinking about it now because you mentioned that, Paula. Okay, yeah, on page 146, you were always good people, still are. So I think that's interesting.
And he asked him, to your point, right? He says, yo, I was good people, right? I never really did nobody that dirty. This is not a direct quote, y'all. I'm just paraphrasing. But he says that, right? Like, I was good people, never hurt nobody.
No,
and to your point, he's asking that. Yeah. And Lydia, like you said, even earlier than that, remember, Buckeye pulls up to the Victorian Society because he heard word that his boy was at the club looking decidingly odd, aka, yo, I saw your mans and he was wilding. You should pull up and go see what's going on with him. Like, he had gotten word that something was already wrong. So I think that's a brilliant understanding that we know that he's already walking into the space with that purpose, right? To try to hold my, like Ron said, there's no choice. He's like, I gotta go see what's up with my boy. Okay. Let's talk about Malone, because y'all got real excited around that. How do we feel about Malone's fate? I love the way it was written. I don't
like that it's written in a way that we're supposed to sympathize with him. I feel like it's the kind of thing where, yeah, I mean, because he lets him survive for one. He disfigures him, yes. So now he's earning these sympathy points because of his disfigurement, you know, having to wear the goggles. He gets to move to this nice, quiet town, you know, retire from the police force. You know, meanwhile, the more evil cops got wiped out. I mean, I just don't like Malone. And it really was like the shoe being put on the other foot. Like, Tommy was vulnerable the first half of the book. And now Malone, from the section we started to have to read to the end, was this vulnerable person who people were looking at him sketchily. He wasn't, you know, wanted in neighborhoods in Brooklyn anymore. Like, he was the one that was having to like prove himself, and he was the one that had to like watch his back after we had to witness Tommy going through that whole thing. And I was like, well, yeah, good. Let him have to do that. I'm like, I don't feel bad for the fact that this guy now is like, you know, fearing for his safety, but that's just, I just thought that he wanted us to sympathize with him. And I couldn't get with that.
Greg, it kind of reminds you of like the movies where, you know, that person like, I have to go see what's down this hallway, you know, or what's in the woods, you know, that sort of thing. That's what Malone reminded me of, like that trope that's always in a scary movie that has to be nosy regardless. And at one point, I think even in the book, he said like he was drawn to having to know, like he was chosen to know, you know, the mystery. He couldn't even turn away when Black Tom was telling him, you know, you don't want to see this. Yes, I must, you know, like he was drawn to it. Maybe because I wouldn't say he knew what his fate was, but maybe he thought somehow he was going to get some power too or something. I don't know.
Right. Or maybe the privilege. Like, I think you actually, Vatasha, yourself named last week, that privilege, whatever's happening, he gonna overcome it, right? Like, he'll get through it.
Yeah, I was smart last week. Uh-huh.
You smart every week. Greg, I love that you mentioned that you didn't like that. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but when I read it as well, I felt that I also understood that he was just subjected now to a life of seeing stuff, right? Like, isn't he now? Because he's not living peacefully. He woke up in the house and it was actually the, what is it called? The great universe, the other side. What is it called? The window, basically all of the magic. He opened up his house and he wasn't in that house in Nantucket or wherever, Long Island, wherever he was. He wasn't there anymore. So isn't he subjected to like a life of delusions and stuff?
Like agony, you're saying?
Did I read that wrong?
Oh, maybe. I mean, the idea
Yeah.
that he's like what, doomed to like eternal suffering or something.
Yeah, but you know, maybe it's
Or
not strong
quite.
enough. Yeah, not quite.
Yeah, it could have been strong enough because, like, when they said he was looking up at the sky and people were looking up to see, like, man, wouldn't that have been crazy for him to actually see the Sleeping King and the people who lived in that town? Like, anyway, but yeah.
Didn't it have something to do with that when he looked up, it was the tallest building in the town? And
yeah,
it
well,
had
he was
to
in the
do with
highest
tall building, yeah. So he was sent away there, and it was almost like they were trying to get him to forget. They were trying to replace his memories. They were brainwashing him, trying to replace his memories with, you know, that was delusional and this is what really happens. And so they were trying to keep him quiet, keep him out of the way and keep him quiet. And it's when he saw the tall building that he freaked out. I don't know. Does it have something to do with the fact that when he was in the basement and the building was falling up on top of him, that may have had some kind of flashback and he freaked out with that? But he did see in the clouds a face. And I think that's what really brought it all back to him. In spite of all these months of brainwashing and all that's, you know, these are not the droids you're looking for, kind of brainwashing that he was subjected to, it came back and he saw the face in the clouds and of the Sleeping King. And that's when he freaked out. So he's never going to get rid of that demon, regardless of what his fraternal order of the policemen are trying to do to help him. He's never going to get rid of that demon.
Now, it was at that point where we find out what Tommy's last words were to him. So that's kind of is important. It's 142, 143 when he's looking at the building and then the eye show. And then he remembers Black Tom's final words, which once again connects back to Lovecraft. I'll take Cthulhu over you devils any day. And Cthulhu is a Lovecraft creation. It's like it's a hybrid of a few different things, like a dragon and all these other things. And even that kind of speaks to, well, the choice of what oppression do you want to live under. And Black Tom saying, I'll take Cthulhu over you devils any day, is indicating I'll take my chances with the black magic and supernatural over the white supremacist devils who have been, you know, holding me down for all of these years, is essentially what that means. That's what I found it to mean.
Thanks for saying that, because I don't follow Lovecraft. I don't watch the series. I've made aware, and also because I never was into sci-fi like Ron. This is not my genre of choice, but I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to read it. So I love being a part of the book club. I put myself out of my comfort zone to engage in the reading of this text. But thanks for providing that context, Greg, because I didn't think about that, but it goes back to, you know, how we started the conversation in terms of, you know, what I would call, or what you might say is justified rage, right? In terms of, you know, I rather deal with, you know, this level of madness, putting it mildly, than dealing with the madness that you all have tried to capture me in. You know, so that's a very interesting perspective. Thanks for sharing that.
Yes. Although I don't feel like it ended that way either for him. I feel like choosing the madness still evoked the madness. Madness begot madness. Madness begets madness. Like I don't
Yeah, I
know
think
if
that's
it's
cool.
as
I think that's all right.
yeah, yeah,
I think that is
yeah.
okay.
Because most science fiction, yes, because most science fiction likes to put a very clear stark between what is good versus what is evil. And like we named many, many moons ago, that essence of morality. And what I love about LaValle's twist on science fiction, but most Black bodies that are centered in a story, beginning with Octavia Butler, is that we understand that very notion, right? That like it is actually a little bit more complicated, and the madness will beget the madness, will beget the madness until the end of days, right? And that sort of science fiction idea of like staying in that is a very dark, very fun concept. So I appreciate
And
LaValle for that. But I'm not gonna hold you. I don't love this writing. Come on, y'all, talk to me. Some criticism here. Let's talk about it.
I just
I don't
wanted to
love
ask.
this writing.
I just wanted to ask if you could refer back to the Lovecraft story that's in connection to this. What's the name of it again?
The Hanging at Red
Yeah,
Hook.
give me 2 seconds so I can give you the proper name. I want to make sure. The Hanging at Red Hook, but let's just make sure. Hold on. Almost there. Give me a moment. It's not The Hanging. Give me one more moment, please. And if my internet service, is anyone else experiencing slow internet? I'm really. I know I said it during the first. I had to read it in high school, y'all. Oh, sick. Sick curriculum. Lovecraft. The Horror at Red Hook.
That's the name of the book?
The Horror at Red Hook is a short story. It's not a whole book. I would say like
Okay.
a page. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes. Horror at Red Hook, y'all. I'm trying to see, is there a quick. Ooh, YouTube has it. I guess someone's saying it aloud for free. If you want to go to YouTube, I'll put it in the chat for you right now. Oh, I see that Ron put it up. So let me mention it.
You're frozen, Paula.
We have.
You're frozen, Paula.
This is.
We lost Paula.
Come back, Paula, come back. This is where you belong. That's a song, but not with Paula. So until Paula comes back, it looks like she was critiquing not the book, but the actual writer himself, and rightly so. Lovecraft recently has received quite a bit of criticism, but I don't know if his writing as a science fiction writer is being critiqued, or if it is just him as a person who's being critiqued, which is kind of one and the same, because your writing sort of comes from who you are, oftentimes, not always. I mean, people write fiction and, and that fiction is separate from who they are. But it is interesting that we are almost sort of honoring this person in his racism. Now, all of a sudden, there are all these different books and movies coming out reflecting his work. And I don't know if that's the best way to I'm using the term honor, but is this the best way to sort of look at, you know, his contribution to science fiction? Should he just be marginalized, or should he, you know, should he be, you know, should we be having dialogues and conversations around his work?
Is Lovecraft white or black?
He's
White.
white.
It was white.
Okay.
But it's so interesting that you say that, because I recently came in contact with Lovecraft, and again, sci-fi has never been my genre, my forte. But every time that he's mentioned or spoken about it, in my circles, in my literary circles, it's always in the context of him being a racist, right? So I feel like that's coming along with him now. That, you know, and that might have always been the case, but the conversations have always been, from what I'm hearing, is that, you know, it's always in concert with his racism, and how his storylines and his texts, you know, were creating these monsters or figures that were out of his fear of Black people or whatever. So hey, like, on one hand, you might, and I know that's not, for lack of a better word, it's an ode to Lovecraft, but there's also some, you know, some things that are following his legacy that are also being exposed, so to speak.
And what they're saying, like
I think-
I went on to I just searched for the book, and there's a review of it, Lovecraft, of the horror Red Hook, and the person says Lovecraft's most bigoted story.
Mhm.
You know,
Which is the point that I was making before, is I don't think that LaValle used this story to honor Lovecraft. It was to refute Lovecraft, because look who ends up killing all the white guys, you know, Black Tom. This is a way of getting back to the bigotry and racism. And he wasn't just, you know, he wasn't just racist. He hated any foreigner. It was what, you know, he was xenophobic. He just didn't like,
Right.
if you weren't from his family, he hated you. He
Right.
was a sick puppy, this guy.
Right.
So
right.
I see that the show Lovecraft, Country, was also refuting the original, because they put these Black characters in they changed the story. They used the Lovecraft stories as the basis for a greater story that made the heroines and the heroes Black. And again, that's refuting the original bigoted point of view that Lovecraft was pushing at the time. And the same goes true with LaValle's story. So I don't see it as an ode or honoring. I see it as refuting the story.
yeah, it looks like they have a 1-hour reading of the story, which I think I'm going to listen to before I finish, because I have like maybe 2 more chapters. So I think I'm going to listen to this story, and maybe it'll give a better context for what we're reading. I guess we just have to view it as a missed opportunity in this context.
Hi,
But-
y'all. I'm back, by the way.
Hey, Cleaver.
Yeah, Cleaver, I took over his phone and now he's gone. No, I'm kidding. He's here around. He's over there. Y'all talking about Lovecraft, the man, the person,
Yeah.
the
And
author.
the sort of, it's not honors, but attention that he's receiving, you know, in a sort of a new generation that probably did not know who he was, but now suddenly he does have this elevated status in a negative way. But you know, capitalism doesn't care, negative or positive. Capitalism puts money in your pocket.
I'll get in those royalties.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm
Yeah.
sure I mean, I don't know, you know, whether his books are available. I know they're available in the library, but like whether there's been an increase in people borrowing them or, you know, or what.
Well, when I
Or
went to
maybe,
Barnes and Noble for Christmas, they had a bunch of Lovecraft mini stories out on, you know, that classics table, you know, around Christmas time is like, buy your Poe, buy your Shakespeare. Now they're like, don't forget your Lovecraft. So you're definitely right about that.
and they put those books there to sell. Those are the, you know, those are the books that they're really, that they believe will sell in
Yeah.
bookstores.
Yeah, I
And naming that
found
love.
this. No, I was going to say I found the series. I could not sit and watch it. I was just like, no, I got better things to do. You know,
Yeah.
you know, I could pick my nose and be ahead, way ahead, with looking at that mess. But anyhow, go ahead.
No, that's fine. I was just naming that. Thank you for that very, very strong and unpopular opinion. So I love that. Lovecraftian itself is a term that is used to describe like monsters and frighteningly scary, horrifying stories. Like naming that right now there's a resurgence of sort of who he was as an author. But, you know, as we said during our first meeting, his influence really is in most science fiction things that we've seen. You know, even Stephen King himself describes his character Pennywise as his most Craftian. I don't know how we would say this, love, because TIA, I want to say Shia, like, but I guess it's Lovecraftian. He says that Pennywise is like his most Lovecraftian monster out of all the monsters that he's written, and he's very much influenced in that, you know. So just naming that, while we have a direct popular sort of understanding of the author today, we've always been in Lovecraft's works, all of us, though even though we in this space are intergenerational, a lot of the stories that we've experienced in our youth have been based on Lovecraft stories, which is pretty wild when you think about it. Also, he was a poet. You know what I mean? Like, if you tell yourself, look, I can't sit and read a whole story, I get it. You know, I've tried to read some of his original stories, even The Horror of Red Hook, which I think is a well-written story. It's a little like slow paced. Get into some of his poems. It gives you an idea of sort of who this man is and how he realms evil and what that looks like. If you're curious, you know, I'm not trying to push his work on you, like, oh, go read Lovecraft, but if you're curious.
Or at least a short story, you know, if you don't want to kind of dedicate yourself to going out and you know, purchasing a book of his, but, you know, if the short stories are available online, at least, you know, see what the issues are.
Mm-hmm. And I'm also reading something here that's pretty interesting. It says that H.P. Lovecraft can be considered the father of the literary philosophy known as cosmicism, right? So the philosophy of cosmicism is something that names that there's no immediate recognizable divine, right? There's no presence such as God or Yamaya, any sort of spiritual, even the universe itself. There is no ruler of that. There is none of that. There is no other human experience. And humans themselves are really, really, really small in the larger scheme of it all. So Lovecraft tries to terrify you with the idea of that, like, in the cosmicism of the world, you are so small and there's no other greater divinity that's going to save you or support you or help you through that. What do y'all think about that? I just felt like disgusting repeating that. What do y'all think about that?
I mean, it makes sense considering the two primary characters in the story are, by the end, are basically playthings of this cosmic entity, right? The Malone and Tommy, it's just like ragdolls, just like kind of tossed to the side, either disfigured or made into completely different people who are unrecognizable to their friends and family. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'm not saying that racism and like a sense of bad morality are connected to any sort of religious or spiritual understanding. You can completely, I believe, not believe in any kind of religion and still have a sense of decency and morality toward other people. But I will name that in that time, you know, Lovecraft is also known for having a deep, deep, deep disdain for things that are religious. Anything religious, he really pushes against. And we see this in some of his other stories too, like Dagon and the Dunwich Horror. Like we see him really come at religious entities and break them down. And naming that someone that has such a disdain, such an anger, such a hatred toward religion, we can assume also leans into someone who doesn't care to see the humanity in other people, right? It just knowing these things about him sort of makes sense about his writing and how he approaches character, even in the structure of his poems.
Well, yeah, because like, wasn't he basically living in poverty for the most point, or like, so it would make sense if he, and especially if he thinks, you know, he is the elite white man, he should not be put in this place, he should not have to suffer this way. Well, then, yeah, I mean, it would be doomsday. You know, you would not see any Black person coming up over him as being someone he would respect or, you know, or honor or anything like that. It makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's like it's like an indifference, right? What we spoke about. Ooh, we spoke about it before. The indifference of it all. I think we named that too.
There's a malice that that he's toxic. That as Lovecraft, as a writer, he's just reflecting his own personal experience and the fact that he hates everybody, and that he, you know, he can't stand religion. You're talking about a narcissistic, toxic personality, and I would hate to run across him in a subway. I just, this kind of person, the way he writes, I mean, the whole notion of the monsters and the sci-fi, I'm drawn to sci-fi, so I enjoy it. But the way he really has disdain, as someone mentioned, for everything and everybody. Is just he's a horrible little man that probably had a horrible childhood, and did he commit suicide or something? Because he sounds like he doesn't like living. I don't know anything about him, but just by, you know, the little that I do know, that anger and hatred that he has, boy, he must really hate himself.
Yeah, of his Wikipedia page, it says he had a lot of family tragedies. So I don't even know what that means.
So I wonder who gets the money for like all of his stuff, since, you know, he was one of those people that like, and how parallel that is to like Zora Neale Hurston. You know, you think about how she basically died in poverty as well. We're just, you know, now she's being checked for. She's one of the goddess of Black literature, but you know, she was also in poverty. And but I do wonder, like, who's getting the money and how different are they from him to this, you know, to this day? Like, I would be so curious to know who are his family members. Are they, you know, what do you call it? I watched Skip Gates, what do you call it? Know Your Roots, and how, yeah. And other than Ben Affleck, which I love Skip Gates. I can't believe he let him get away with that. But anyway, but yeah. But like, what's his name? What's the white haired dude from Gloria Vanderbilt's son, Anderson Cooper? He was just like, okay, and this guy basically he was hung and killed for yada yada because you know, and he owned slaves. And what's the name? Anderson was like, good. I'm glad to hear that. You know, he deserved that. So I will always love Anderson Cooper. But anyway, but I wonder if the family of this Lovecraft guy or whoever's getting the money, if they are denouncing him. I that part I would like to research and find out.
And they might not be getting the money, depending on how things were left.
Yeah.
That money could be going to a very shrewd agent or editor. you know, because
It could be part of the public domain at one point. After a certain amount of years, doesn't it become, you know, public property, public domain?
I think it's after 100 years that becomes public domain too. So
Well,
we're
we're getting there.
basically at that point.
Yeah.
Apparently, from Cleaver's naming 70 to 100. Cleaver, they're looking at you.
Oh my gosh.
Hi.
I don't know for sure.
Okay, sorry. He's Hey, Cleaver. Oh, this is interesting that I just found on Wikipedia that any one of us could have written at this point, but why not share it? It's saying that due to Lovecraft's fear of doctors, which of course he would have a fear of doctors, right? He was not examined until a month before he was dead, and they saw that his health was deteriorating and he was suffering from the gripe, as my people call it, the gripe. After seeing the doctor, he was diagnosed with cancer of the small intestine, and he remained hospitalized until he died. Apparently, he lived in constant pain and died in March 15th in 1937 in Providence, Rhode Island. In accordance with his lifelong scientific curiosity, he kept a diary of his illness. He kept a diary of his illness until he was physically incapable of holding a pen.
Well, that makes a lot of sense because the poison that he was projecting, he internalized. That makes that's
Period.
it.
Period.
Poetic justice.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Apparently he wrote The Horror of Red Hook because he was working there as a loading dock person and he got robbed by Black people. So he ended up writing The Horror of Red Hook. I'm reading all of this on Wikipedia. Feel free to. No, with 6 minutes left, I do really want to thank you all for showing up, especially, I think it was Lydia that mentioned it before. Science fiction is really one of those genres that either you're committed to suspending your belief and you challenge yourself to say, hey, I'm going to suspend whatever I know to be true in order to be in this story. Or maybe like me or Evelyn, you totally are here for it, Spock forever. You know what I mean? And I'm really, really happy that we were able to not only sort of name themes and tropes and just outright say, yeah, this was ridiculous, this was right, but also be in a space where we can see the past and name what it looks like for Black body to sort of be in choice in the future, right? And all these tools of vengeance and anger and peace, right? And how all those things integrate. And I really appreciate being in opposing and being challenged by you all. It's really beautiful. And I really love y'all. It's a great way to end 2020 and come into 2021 with something fresh and new.